Hi, my name is Shana, Pennington-Baird. I live in Seattle, Washington, and I am recording this story of mine from my booth in my house. I'm a voiceover artist in Seattle, Washington, and this is a padded cell that is in my house where I record video games and audiobooks and commercials for banks, and that's what I do for a living. It's what I've done for 10 years. But more to the point of this story, I'm 47 now, and when I was 45, my family and I decided to go on this amazing European trip. I had a work conference planned in Ireland, and I knew I could not go to Ireland for voiceover for this conference without taking my husband to Scotland. It just seemed really uncool. And so I packed everybody off to Europe for a couple of weeks. And I had some odd health stuff right before we left, but it was so tiny and so small and nothing worth worrying about. A little bit of heartburn. And I can go kind of into that later. So I had a little bit of heartburn. My husband's like, hey, you're getting older. I took some Prilosec. And it happened three times before we left. But I remember thinking, yeah, I probably should have this looked at, but I'm sure I'm fine. So we left and we went to Iceland. We were in Iceland for 3 days, and then we went to Scotland for a week. It was phenomenal. Came back to Dublin, which is this picture. This is my husband, Ben. This is my small daughter, who was 8 at the time. This is Maddie. And the day after this picture was taken, these guys got on a plane and went home. And I went up to Giant's Causeway. So anyway, there we go. They decided to head home, and I was by myself. And so all day I went to this amazing place called Giant's Causeway, and I went for, I kid you not, a 7-mile hike. And I felt great. I felt fantastic. The day was fantastic. I'd been a little sick. I'd had a head cold. And I remember in Scotland, there was one night that, again, I had that weird heartburn feeling again. And I was like, man, I wonder if this is something serious. And I went to bed early. We were near the Isle of Skye. And then I woke up the next day and had a head cold, lots of coughing. We go back to Dublin. They fly home. I go to Giant's Causeway. I have the most amazing time ever. And then I drove to Cork, which is a town where my college roommate lives. And I stayed overnight in Cork. Felt great. Did a voiceover gig at the top floor of this really cool Airbnb. Learned to like Barry's Irish tea. Had lunch the next day with my friend Mark O'Shaughnessy. Went for another 2-mile hike with him. I felt great. Got in the car. Drove to the wilds of Ireland, which is Dingle, the Dingle Peninsula, which is this beautiful, beautiful place. I've got some pictures. I'll pop those up too. And I remember that I coughed. I had a really, really bad coughing sensation. And when that happened, it didn't feel good. I kind of felt like a little flap thing. No pain, just like this flapping thing up here near my glottis. And maybe probably wasn't up that high, but I felt something. Pulled into the Airbnb, and it was my favorite one. I solo travel, loved solo travel. And I went into the house, and it wasn't cute. It was really ugly inside that house. And I was like, what an odd thing to think. This is supposed to be my favorite little place to stay. Why does it look so ugly? Why am I in such a bad mood? And I thought something inside me said, go get your phone. So I go back out to my rental car and I grab the phone and I come back in. It's still not cute. And I'm starting to sweat now. And I'm talking buckets of sweat, like needing windshield wipers kind of sweat. So I went in and I went to the bathroom. And I went to the bathroom and I'm in there. And I was like, well, how do I call 911? I have a feeling I need to do that. And so I looked it up. I had internet. I thank God I had internet. And I dialed, they said 999. So I dialed 999. And I got this lovely gentleman on the phone who said, I told him where I was. And he said, we want you to go lie down. Will you lie down for us? So I went to the bed and I laid down. And he's talking about my daughter. He's keeping me on the phone. He's keeping me really calm. I'm still pretty calm. I mean, I'm sweating a lot. And but I keep thinking maybe a heart attack. I mean, I don't know. And about 20 minutes later, these two gentlemen pull up to this what should be an adorable Airbnb. And if they got lost, I had to help them. I'm like, okay, no, you've gone too far. You need to come back through the 2 big stone pillars. Yeah. And you make a really hard right. And then, so they came in. And the first guy, he comes up to the side of the bed and he goes, I can't get a pulse. She's got no pulse. And I was like, well, I'm talking to you, so I think we should assume I'm still alive. And the other guy goes, oh, you're going to be a right crack on the way to the hospital. And so I was really calm. I was like, well, I guess we should go. And so they load me into the ambulance. And as they're doing that, the guy who owns the Airbnb, Michael, comes out. And I remember going, hey, I'm Shana. I don't think I'm staying here tonight. I'm really sorry. I need to leave my car. I need to leave my bag. I'm just really sorry. But anyways, nice to meet you. We're going to go now. Anyway, Michael and Lisa were the owners of that Airbnb. And so they take me to a hospital about 20 minutes away in Tralee, Ireland. And I'm in that room probably 3 or 4 hours, and they can't figure out what's wrong with me because, as you can see, I look pretty young for my age. I mean, I'm 47 now, but I tend to have a kind of a baby face and a young voice, and they just didn't know what was wrong. They did an EKG. They could see fluid around my heart. They kind of kept asking me, do you eat a really fatty diet? And I was like, sometimes, not too much. And they're like, do you have hypertension, high blood pressure? And I was like, no, not that I know about. And then they're like, are you allergic to any drugs? And I was like, yeah, Demerol. And I distinctly remember almost like a freak out in the ER going, what the heck's Demerol? And I remember Demerol is there's another word for it in Ireland. All the medications have different names there. So they figured out it was whatever it was. And they're like, it's fine. We're not going to put her on that. She'll be fine. And so then I'm shouting out my husband's phone number. So they have it. And they kind of elevate my feet. At this point, I ask for water and I start to throw up. And I can feel pressure on my chest now. And I'm also starting to get a little scared because I'm all by myself in Ireland and I don't really know what's going on. Lots of people are gathering. I don't know how many people were in that area of the emergency room. It's a little bit hard to remember. But this one nurse was lovely. She kind of stayed with me, and she's like, I can't give you any more water. I'm like, yeah, you probably can't. I have this feeling I'm probably going to have surgery. And so she gives me some ice cubes, some things to kind of dampen my mouth. And then they send me in for a CAT scan. And that's when things start getting very fast, very quick. So I remember the CAT scan had a British dialect, which I thought was hysterical. And they warned me all about when they give you a CAT scan with, I can't think what, contrast, how it makes you feel like you're going to have to pee. And I remember getting that scan done. And then, boy, they had me on that ambulance in like 5 minutes. And I also remember the surgeon they put on the ambulance with me, he looked terrified. And I remember seeing that and thinking, guy looks really scared. And they're putting barf bags all over the ambulance. And I'm like, well, I know I was throwing up earlier, but that's a lot of barf bags. It turns out that the emergency room doctor who's on the ambulance with us also gets very carsick. And this road that we're traveling is from Tralee to Cork. And if you haven't done that ride, it is very, very, very curvy. And there's a castle in the middle of the road. Seriously. I remember like that day driving and seeing, hey, there's a castle in the middle of the road. And having to drive out around it. And we're on the ambulance. And I'm like, hey, are we doing that road that has the castle in the middle? Like, oh, yeah. Yeah, it's going to be very hilly, Shana. Shana. They call me Shana a lot. And so as we take off, they have forgotten to strap my gurney down. So that first roundabout out of Tralee was very exciting. I kind of remember kind of careening all around the ambulance, and then they locked me in. Everything was fine. As we're traveling, the emergency room doctor is throwing up a lot. And I remember thinking, someone needs to calm everybody down. And I remember I started telling stories like you do on car trips. And the one guy, really neat EMT guy, had his hands on my shoulders. And he was like, oh, Shana, these are great stories. And I was like, let's pretend it's 1945 and the we're in an air travel and it's World War II and the great, the Red Baron's on our tail. And then I realized that's World War I and it made me laugh. And I was like, and I've taken terrible shrapnel to the chest and we've just got to get these code books back over the border, and everyone's laughing. And the guy stops throwing up, and, it's kind of odd to be going through this major thing and we're laughing and having a road trip. And this is probably not similar to most people's stories. So at any rate, we finished the storytelling and the doctor reaches over and he grabs my foot and he goes, I can't believe you're comforting me. And I was like, well, we're all in this together. And then so I guess I was awake for the whole hour and a half ride back to Cork. And at one point, they're like, okay, Shana, it's going to get really windy. And I think I was like, don't hit any sheep, which they didn't think was funny, but I did. And we get closer, and a huge argument now ensues on the radio. I hear them go, oh, no, you can't be bringing her to the, might be going Scottish there. You can't be bringing her to the emergency room, to the main doors. You've got to take her to emergency. And they were like, no, we're bringing her to the front doors. Like, no, you have to follow precaution. They're like, no, listen to us. We will not take her to the emergency room doors. And I remember thinking, why are they fighting about this? This is a very strange thing to fight about. Well, now that I've spent a lot of time in that hospital, the emergency room doors are like a 10-minute journey through the old part of the hospital, up an elevator, then another thing, and then another elevator, and then finally you make it to the operating theater. Whereas the front door, you pull into Cork University Hospital, you come in the front door past this really cool sculpture of a heart with a big old tourniquet around it, and you come up, you literally get on the elevator, and you are in the operating theater. That's how quickly they were trying to get me to the operating table. So I think they gave the surgeon on board, like, I don't know, a scalpel. And they must have said, if she goes south, if this doesn't help, fix her. Anyway, I still don't know what's wrong with me. So I'm not panicked like everyone else is, right? So they get me on the elevator and I'm still cracking jokes. I'm like, okay, so I would like a tummy tuck. I would like my roots done. And they're laughing. And although they're starting not to laugh as much. And at one point they were like, okay, Shana, do you have any metal on you? And I was like, well, I've got my wedding ring. And they were like, oh, we're going to have to cut that off. And I was like, no, just use soap. Just soap it off. It'll come right off. And sure enough, when I woke up, there was a little note with my ring said, sure enough, soap did the trick. And I wear this other ring now on my finger. This is a very important ring to me. And because it's all the people that came together anyway to keep me alive. So I wear this. They put me to sleep. I was, I woke up. I don't know. It was a 12-hour surgery. Those of you who already know about this stuff know, right? I still don't know. So I wake up and I didn't feel that bad. I just remember I had my phone totally dead at this point, my iPhone. And it was down kind of near my crotch. And I distinctly remembered moving. And I felt that, the incision they have to put in when they do the bypass machine, mine was in my right hip, groin area, right? And I remember moving my hands a little bit and noticing that they had given me they'd shaved me down there for that surgery. And my first thought upon getting up and waking up was, I did not ask for a Brazilian. I asked for a tummy tuck, which made me giggle. And they'd taken the intubation out. So I could giggle, right? Thank God they took it out while I was still asleep. And the nurse comes bolting over to me and she's, oh, you can't be laughing. That's not normal. And I was just sitting there giggling, which is, when you're on all the drugs and you're coming up out of that weird place where you've been. And I have no memories of when I was under. It's all dark. There were no dreams. There were no white lights, no rainbow bridge, nothing. Just not there. I woke up in the ICU. That first day, I still don't know what happened to me. It was weird. Who knows what will happen that next 24 hours, because I remember the clock on the wall never changed. Like it was 7:15 all the time. And I also remember asking the nurse the same questions over and over again. And she answered me over and over again. I know I talked to my husband on the phone. I don't have any recollection of what was said. I don't think I talked to my daughter, who was 8. I didn't, I talked to my mother. I love my mom. Here's what she said. She goes, well, you're young and strong, honey. I think you'll pull through. And I remember distinctly the next time I talked to my husband going, what does she mean by might pull through? What's this might? And my husband going, you're okay. You're okay. I mean, I distinctly remember. I remember getting up and they would, put you on the side of the bed to have you stand up carefully. And then I remembered, oh, syncope. That's falling down. I must be a syncope risk. And I knew syncope from doing voiceover. And I remember they turned me around and I could see cows from the ICU. And I was like, I'm still in Ireland, which, everyone had dialects anyway. My college roommate came to see me in the ICU, and so did the Airbnb people that I had been staying with prior to Lisa and Michael. Lisa came to all the hospitals. I don't remember what she looks like. I know I saw her, but I don't remember what she looks like. I remember her voice. Michael, her husband, took my rental car back. Wow, they didn't charge me a dime, either Airbnb or the rental car company. They were, I think, really glad I was alive. He brought my suitcase to me. And I remember then the other Airbnb people, they brought me a suitcase and bags of, oh my, Irish hospitality, silk nightgowns, a silk robe, the most comfortable, soft jacket imaginable, strawberries, fizzy water, oil of Olay, tampons, underwear. There's more. Fruit. I mean, it was better than 5-star. It was, I mean, this nightgown was from the probably 1930s. It fit me perfectly. So imagine this giant scar, right? I've got drain holes. I still have the tape going across my, there's my scar. This I still have tape going across here, and I am decked out in the most beautiful nightgown imaginable in the ICU in Ireland, 5,000 miles from my family. I still don't know what happened to me, and no one's telling me. It's a teaching hospital. So they keep bringing students in every day, and I feel a little like a bug because they'd all file in and look at the chart and look at me and talk and look at me with these looks on their faces like this. Okay, I remember looking at all their faces and going, huh, someone needs to tell me what happened. I do remember one kind of horrifying moment where the doctor, he was of Indian descent, and he said, I remember I was still in bed. Must have been day 1 or day 2, right? And he pointed to the chair next to me. And I think what he actually said was, I'd like to see you in one of those, meaning I'd gotten out of bed. What my brain heard was, you're gonna be in one of those. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'll be in a wheelchair the rest of my life. Oh, wow. That's not what I expected. And it took a while for my brain to unhinge from that and realize what he actually meant, and that my legs were working fine. And I also remember asking the nurse to get my iPad out. And she was like, oh, no, you can't be working. And I was like, no, I have a voiceover file that I recorded before this happened. I need to send it. It will probably pay for my hospital stay. I need to send this file. And so she did. She helped me get it out, and I was still on, morphine. So I think the email I sent to my friend was like, here's the foil you need. Can you please fix? And, my friend who had hired me loved getting the file. He definitely used it. It did help pay for my being there. And a couple of days later, he sends me a message going, are you okay? Can we send you more work? Will it kill you? You're stuck in Ireland. Can we send you more voiceover work? And I was like, sure, send it. And I'll get to that. So I leave the ICU and I head down into the wards. I still feel kind of great. I mean, there's no fear. Other than my mother telling me I might pull through, I don't know crap. I've had a heart attack that requires a huge scar and drain holes. No one's telling me anything. I go into the first ward room and there was a man from Limerick. There once was a man from Limerick. That's a bad joke. Anyway, he's across the bed from me and he never speaks. He's probably in his 70s. He just stares at me. That was creepy. Okay. There was another, I don't really remember the other people in that room, but my call button didn't work. I remember my phone finally got charged and I could send a message out to the world, which is like, I did text to speech and it's the most jumbled garbage it's like, here's the foil you need. I was on so many drugs trying to tell everyone what had happened. And it was long and it went on to Facebook and it's something else. And I remember I also was going through my bag. Again, Mark O'Shaughnessy, my college roommate, when he visited, he goes, it hasn't hit you what happened yet. I'm like, I don't know. No, it hasn't hit me because I actually don't know yet. He didn't know either. So I start unpacking things and I find this little tiny stuffed animal that my daughter and I bought in Scotland. It's a hairy haggis. I don't have a photo that I can show you, but anyway, it's upstairs. But there's this little haggis. It's furry. Haggis is actually food, I know. But anyway, it's the joke haggis, the haggis that can eat you in Scotland. Anyway, so I had that, and I pulled it out, and I remember I had that moment of realizing how alone I was, and I lost it. Just, when you're on oxygen and you start just sobbing. I remember I soaked the poor little haggis. He got very wet, and I had snot. the man from Limerick, he's not really enjoying my freak out. And I remember, I climbed back in bed for a while, got back out, and I hit the call button. Call buttons weren't working. So I climbed out of bed like you do right after open heart surgery and grabbed my IV and marched out into the middle of the ward and said, I don't think my call button works. They're like, get back in bed. So I'm going back in bed. And for whatever reason, because the call button, I guess, or maybe the man from Limerick, they moved me to another room. And the other room was way better. And there were the most awesome women in this room. And now my story gets happier. So I moved into a room with Fiona and June. And Fiona has a blood clot in her hand. She's a musician, phenomenal woman, probably a little younger than me, 2 young kids. And she, so she's in a lot of pain and scared. She has a pacemaker. So she's dealing with that. But we are bonding and having fun and laughing and talking. And at one point we were singing. And I remember, and by the way, I did have breath stuff. I had the little breath ball. I did have trouble taking big, huge breaths, especially for the voiceover files I was doing. And I remember the woman next to us, Iona, was not feeling well. She was having a lot of procedures done. And they always had her fasting. Oh, they bring you tea in Irish hospitals 4 times a day. Best thing ever. The food was awful. So awful. But the tea was amazing. And I love Irish food. Not Irish hospital food. At one point, at the bottom of the card, it said, made with all Irish beef. And I was like, you should probably take that off. I didn't say that. They also served me butter with a side of butter. And I was like, it just looked like a big slab of melted margarine with butter on the side. It was cheesecake. It was actually really good. Anyway, back to tea and Iona. So the tea was great, but I remember she could never have the tea because she was fasting. She had to fast until the next surgery. And I remember I got these voiceover files, and there's beeping everywhere. This ward was so loud. You had people being nebulized and beep, beep, beep all the time. And I was like, how am I going to record these files? They were corporate narration. Thank God it wasn't like a video game with that would have been very bad in a hospital. So I'm trying to figure out where I should record these files because, I don't have a huge incision in my chest. And my friend Fiona goes, first I was like, I'm going to go down to the chapels. I'm pretty sure I can go downstairs and record this. She's like, oh, no, there's too much water. You got waterfalls in there. And I was like, oh, that's right, the holy water. So I was like, okay, I know what to do. It was like 10:30 at night. And I was like, I'm just going to go down the hallway, and I bet I can find a quiet place. She's like, I'll tell him you're in the shower. I'll cover for you. So I'm in, my 1930s gown, huge, still have tape. Drain holes have been pulled out at this point. Staples in my crotch. That hurt way worse. The crotch hurts so much worse than the chest. I hobble, I have sternal precautions. So I have my little microphone and my little studio. I have my iPad. It doesn't weigh too much. And I'm going down the hallway, and I see the X-ray room, and it has a big sign that says no admittance. It's like, but it's quiet in there. What's the worst thing they do? Kick me out? Probably not. So I use my butt to open the door. I slide into this quiet, pitch black X-ray room, sat down on the floor, and proceeded to record 20 minutes of sexual harassment training. In short phrases, because I still didn't have my full breath back yet. So I was phrasing. But the voiceover gigs I completed did help pay for all this stuff that happened, including travel insurance, which also paid for my $10,000 surgery. That's all it cost. 8 days in the hospital, full, surgery, 12-hour surgery, $10,000 in Ireland. That's the difference between that and the States. So at this point, my husband is on his way back. He arrives in Ireland. It's taken him 4 days to get back to me. And the surgeon, who's this blonde, tall goddess, she's amazing. She comes in to tell us news about everything that's happened. She pulls the curtain, and she says, well, I have really bad news for you guys. You can't have children anymore. And that's probably really hard for most people to hear. I'm 45. Ben had already had a vasectomy. We were like, okay, that's cool. Like, you're going to be on a medication for life called warfarin or Coumadin. And you can't have children if you're on that medicine. I was like, okay, that's cool. And I said to her, can I scuba dive? Now, for those of you who know what already happened to me, why would I even ask that, right? But I didn't know what had happened to me yet. And she's like, no, I don't think you can scuba dive anymore. And I was like, okay, all right, well. So at this point, she kind of says what happens. And it came into that's the sort of where it hit home for Ben and for me a little. She said, here's the deal. I think you had a AAA, an ascending aortic aneurysm rupture. Your aneurysm, she draws the picture, was greater than 7 centimeters. And when she was trying to make the repair, which she successfully did, or I wouldn't be here, she said it was thinner than paper. There were just barely cells hanging on. And somehow it had tamponated, meaning whenever it first happened, and I think it happened almost a month before, it blew, and then it kept clotting back up, saving my life every single time. So she says to us while we're sitting there, and all I can think about is, well, can I still ride roller coasters? Can I snowboard? I mean, I literally am not in a dark place mentally yet. And she said, none of us expected you to survive the ambulance ride here. And none of us expected you to survive the surgery. And I said, oh. But again, I'm healing. I'm in Ireland. My husband's with me. I did not Google anything. They gave me a heart, what to do if you have heart surgery booklet, which you're supposed to read before the procedure, not after, right? And everyone in it has gray hair, and they're talking about Ross procedures and all this stuff. And I have a St. Jude mechanical aortic valve, right there. The aorta is still there. It's the aortic valve, and there's a graft. And so I knew about the medicine, right? And I'm healing, and I'm feeling pretty good. A little afraid in the middle of the night sometimes. Sleep, I watch Netflix until I pass out. I have my earphones in. Ben is staying for free at this amazing hostel nearby. And then I leave the hospital on day 8. That's my husband yelling at my dog. Leave the hospital day 8, and friends of friends from Seattle had a house in Cork, and they needed house sitters. And so we got to move directly out of the hospital into this beautiful little home in Cork. One staircase that I had to deal with, but that's good to do stairs anyway. And I would go for strolls and walks and all of that. And we literally took a cab. It was very bumpy. I wish he had not gone the back routes. Anyway, very bumpy cab ride from the hospital to this house. And the first thing they did was they served me bacon rashers and eggs. And if you haven't had bacon rashers, wow. It's like Barry's tea. It's so good. So anyway, I felt pretty human. And so I've got the medicine. I'm getting better every day. I get very cold when I go outside. It's Ireland. I think everyone gets cold when they go outside. But, it's August, and I still couldn't really get warm. I was supposed to go walk, try to walk the neighborhood, and there was a beautiful park with lots of little fairy knolls. First rule is don't talk about the fairy knolls in Ireland, but we're here, so. Anyway, I couldn't make it across the street. So that was a sign that something had happened to me. But again, spirits were pretty high. I talked to my daughter a bunch of times. I just wanted to get home. We knew I couldn't go home for at least a couple weeks. So Ben made plans to go back home to take care of our daughter, and my mother made plans to come out and be with me. And my mom is 75 at the time. I've never been to Ireland, always wanted to go. Never been to Europe. I wanted to take her to Europe. Not really like this. I had a lot of anxiety around Ben's leaving because I still had that, what if I never see him again? And then my mom shows up, and I do remember this distinctly. What they said in the doctor's room was they said, never get excited about anything ever again. Keep your blood pressure low. And I said, my mother's coming. Do you have drugs for that? She's like, I can get them for you if you need it. And I was like, I'll try to handle it. Anyway, I love my mom, but my blood pressure goes up when I'm around her, and she tends to have a little bit of anxiety. So at any rate, they switch. My mom comes, and we spend the next week and a half enjoying Cork. We went to Oliver Plunkett Street every day. I bought a boron drum. I spent time in the kitchen with my healing scar, learning to play the boron. And my mom, it was so good for me, right? I was singing too. I mean, what better thing to do for your lungs? As I was practicing as many Irish tunes as I could while this and again, not Googling what happened to me. I knew I had open heart surgery. I knew I had a graft. I knew that I was alive. Okay. So at the end of being in Ireland, I started to be in a little more pain. I went to see the surgeon, and she checked the top of my scar was not healing. And she goes, when you get home, I want a thoracic surgeon to see that. I said, okay. So we go to Dublin for 2 days. And that second day in Dublin, I just don't feel good. Don't feel good. It's not great. So we fly Iceland Air, which is the original airline we had to go to Iceland and then to Seattle. And the flight from Dublin to Iceland, I was in a huge amount of pain. I was that woman. They get the call, is there a doctor on board? My mother. My mother. And so the doctor comes and sees me, and I was like, hi. He checks me to make sure I can do double pressure, right? Pressure's fine. And he's like, do you have any good drugs? I went, sure do. He goes, take some. I said, I think I'll do that. And the drugs really helped. Yay, OxyContin. I love getting off of it way more than taking it. But I took it, helped. We get to Iceland, and I'm starting to feel better. I'm sort of okay now, but I don't want to get stuck in Iceland. So I get wheelchair treatment out to the next flight. They actually wheel you out like food, and they take you up and load you on. And that 7-hour flight, again, I was in a lot of pain, but I got through it fine. I walked the flight every hour. I walked the aisles. And we get to Seattle, and I was home for less than 24 hours before I was back in the hospital with 2 infections in my chest cavity. So the wires had become infected. I was in Virginia Mason for 8 more days while they removed the wires, 2 more surgeries. I could see where my house was, but I wasn't home. Could barely see my daughter. She was so upset because I was home and then gone again so fast. My time at Virginia Mason, I have no good stories about. Nothing funny. I started to know what happened to me. We started to use the words AAA. I started to realize, everyone kept saying, you're so lucky. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? And then I come home from Virginia Mason. I find out, I Google aneurysm, that I was a ruptured aneurysm and that the chances of survival are not real. They're not real high. I think that bubble burst on July 27th. I remember feeling a popping sensation in my chest when I was crossing the street. And I was very grumpy that night. I was in a very bad mood. I felt awful. And I'm not that type of person. And then my husband's like, it's just heartburn. I was like, no, I don't feel good. And that felt better the next day. And then I went about a week. I got on my Peloton bike, couldn't keep up. I had no power. And I was like, something's wrong. Ben, I went upstairs and said, I think something's wrong. This is still before the trip, right? And then I had heartburn 2 more times. And then the rest of the story. So I think that puppy started to tear almost a month. They say 4 weeks is, almost like guaranteed fatality. So that's the story. The story got more creative, but that's for another time, right? My health is good. My health is really good. I'm back in Seattle. I wrote a show about the whole thing called Broken Wide Open, with a lot of stories I just told and a lot of Irish music and my Borin drum. I'm going to play it. I can't wait to go back. I can't wait to go back and say thank you. And I'm on the 1-year anniversary. I remember I bought chocolate and I bought flowers and I sent it to the ER in Tralee. I was like, hey guys, I'm okay. Oh, I forgot to tell you my favorite story. Okay, so there's so many stories, but I was in the wards at this point, and I get a call from the main desk, and they're like, hey, Shana, you should come out. All the doctors in Tralee, the emergency doctors, want to talk to you. And I was like, they what? Why? Because remember, I don't know what happened to me. And I was like, sure. So I get out of bed in that gown, right? I walk over, and I'm like, hey, what's up? And they're like, Shana, are you okay? How do you feel? Remember, I don't know what happened. I'm like, I feel great. And they're like, you feel great? As I bump my mic again. I still feel great. I am so grateful to be alive. And I ride my Peloton bike 4 times a week. I have not had to take any drugs for the anxiety, including after I got diagnosed with breast cancer. Like I said, that's another story. I'm doing great there too. A lot of different surgeries. I've had a lot of health stuff. All that went down in 6 months, and then the pandemic hit. Woo! So I've stayed inside a lot, But I'm really, really glad to be here. I'm glad to share my story. I'm gonna continue to share it in lots of creative ways. That's how I process things. I'm really glad to be here. So, at any rate, that's the end of my story. Thank you for listening.